It's great to have Monique with us and Kirk with us, and we thank you for your presence here. Peter Stenke is quoted, "A significant measure of the health of the congregation is not where it stands in moments of comfort and ease, but rather where it stands at times of challenge and crisis." I think we can all admit that these are challenging times. The subject matter today is both vital and important. 50 years ago, when someone that I know started ministry, these challenges weren't even thought of. They weren't on the table. I kind of remember way back when, I think it was a case in California, that a pastor in counseling a woman who was thinking of divorcing her husband, the pastor said because it was an abusive relationship, you should get out of, save yourself and protect yourself. And he was sued by the husband for giving wrong information. And that was the first I've ever heard of it. Things today have changed tremendously. I personally take great comfort when the church and myself is under pressure and challenge, whether it be in preparation for a message or one of those voters' meetings or counseling sessions. The words of Isaiah, chapter 41. "Fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right arm." No doubt these are challenging times. I don't know if you've ever seen, one of the most, and it wasn't that long ago, I was down in Arlington, one of the most solemn and moving ceremonies I ever experienced was the changing of the guard at the tomb of the unknown soldier. Anybody ever seen that? It's quick, it's simplistic, but it's absolutely awesome. The guard on duty marches to the place where he makes his departure, and he declares with great authority, "Orders remain." The guard coming on duty, before he moves in to take his place as the guard for that time, equally receives the great command, and he responds, "Orders acknowledged." Our orders as the church and the body of Christ, they remain the same. We must clearly hear the voice of our Lord, letting nothing distract us, let nothing derail us. The mission and the purpose is clear. By the suffering, death, and resurrection of our Lord and Savior. The command, the order given, "Go, therefore, and make disciples of all nations." Orders remain. Just as well as the church of today must respond with equal commitment, orders acknowledged. Go, therefore, and make disciples of all nations. In these unprecedented times of challenge, and in sometimes times of crisis, today is important, and it is vital to the continuing mission of Christ and the order that he gave, which stands until his return. We join our hearts together in prayer. Our gracious Heavenly Father, we are blessed and we are honored to be called as your people, to be part of your church. The order remains. Go, therefore, into all nations, to seek and to save the lost. And the orders are received. But gracious Father, there are so many things that can derail that mission. There are so many things that we need to be aware of and to stand against and stand firm and stand strong in the name of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. So bless our time together this day. Bless our presenters. Help us to keep open ears and open hearts to hear what you would want us to do in these difficult times. Give us strength and give us courage. And remind us again and again that you will not forsake us, that indeed you will be with us, that you will guide us, you will direct us, you will strengthen, uphold, and care for us. For these things we pray in the name of Christ our Lord. Amen. Thank you. Where do Monique?
When I had Monique before at one of our trainings, I happened to look at her bio, and it said that she had a degree in human resources. So I called her up when I couldn't find anybody at St. Louis to come out and help us, and she was willing to help us out. So she's going to be talking about the procedures and policies and things you should have in place. And if you have a school, they probably already have one. But the church and schools policy, if you're not incorporated separately, need to be the same. That's why we have you all here. Monique?
Live now, just say 1, 2, 3.
1, 2, 3. There we go. Sorry about that. There we go. So, again, welcome. It is a delight to be here. Thank you for taking time on a Saturday. Being a pastor's kid and a pastor's wife, I know how valuable time is, especially on a Saturday. So I greatly appreciate you coming out. So my last disclaimer is that I am not an expert at human resources. And who gave the devotion? Pastor? So you did say we're in tough times, and we are in tough times. Being an ex-school principal, Lutheran school principal, things changed around 2008. And you can see the changes in the students' behavior and the parents' behavior, because now it's not all, and you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, but not all parents, but you have a percentage out there that it's a sue society, and you can't say, you can't touch, and that's how I was brought up in the Lutheran church, that time, talent, treasures, and touch. That you can hug someone And then I'm told you can't even touch. I mean, it's like hands up. So we are in a difficult stage in society, and I know that I am not the expert, and a lot of my PowerPoint presentation will overlap because I've done this in different arenas, and I just pulled together some scenarios and some slides, so hopefully we can have some dialogue. But first I want to start with a clean slate. I want to show a video, and I too talked to Pastor Taylor before, so I'm in a happy mood. He's just that type of pastor. So I'm going to show a video about clean slate. We're going to end with the video, and then I will end with the song, and then I will get out of your way. But let's start with, can I go ahead and begin? Okay. So clean slate. So, oh, give thanks unto the Lord, for he is good, and his mercies endure forever. I wanted to start with a clean slate because I think that we all as humans, we make mistakes. And we have to pick ourselves up, dust ourselves off, and give ourselves the glory, or give God the glory, and move on with a new day. So let me open up my presentation and we can get started. I knew I shouldn't have. Yeah, here we go. All right. Sorry about that. It is not, it is stuck. So if I'm trying to start this from the beginning, I don't know, for some reason it is stuck on this one slide. Is anyone tech savvy that could help? Yeah. I don't know why it is stuck on the first slide here. Yeah, I'm doing slide. I don't know why it's not. Okay, so policy and procedure. So we're at this intersection of policy and procedures, and I know that just as the pastor stated, 50 years ago, I'm 52. So when my dad he still is a pastor in St. Louis. But I clearly remember my dad and my mom working together hand in hand. Mom was the organist, mom led the choirs, and things of that nature. And it was no application, it was no background check, it was no fingerprint, it was no formal panel that had to interview her. But this is where we find ourselves now, in this intersection of policy and procedures. So if you don't have them in place in your church or in your school, then you need to have that conversation with the board or someone so that you can get on the same page. Thank you so much. So who, just by show of hands, Who has a school connected with the church? Okay, so we have quite a bit. All right, so, and do you have your board meetings, you have a school board and a church council that they merge together monthly, or no? It's still separate. Separate? But do you have the same mission and mission statement and vision? Yes, no? Okay, well, we can just start with where we are. So policies and procedures. So first, I want to define where are we with policy and procedure. So first, let's just define policy. A course of principle of action adopted or proposed by a government, party, business, or individual. So that is policy. Now, procedure is an established or official way of doing something. So for HR examples, so policy would be the vacation policy, 2 weeks paid after 1 year, et cetera. And the procedures would be, how do I request time off? How do I fill out vacation request form? How do I track vacation days for each employee? So that would be the procedure. So the policies and procedures that we find ourselves in, especially in the church, and when there's a church connected with the school, we find ourselves sometimes in a place where we don't know who took vacation time, when, where, and what. It's like the honor system. And that's the system, to be honest with you, that's the system that I'm accustomed to, is you keep track of your own time, but now we're in this society where everything has to be documented. It didn't happen unless it was documented. By show of hands, if you do have a school, how do I ask this? How many of your employees are Lutheran? 0? Yeah. 1? 3? 0? So, and I'm not saying that they're not Christian, but this is where policies and procedures come in place. Because if they don't know the language and speak the language, then sometimes the language gets interpreted wrong. And let me just say, what do I mean by that? So you have a non-Lutheran, and when you have a non-Lutheran in your school or in your church, do you have what is it to be a Lutheran, or what is Lutheranism? Do you have that sort of hour or 2 hours doing your training? If you don't, I challenge you to do so, because the language that we speak, LCMS, I mean, first, we have all these acronyms that if they don't know, we're assuming that they know. And they can come back and get you, and I mean, this is not a got you, but they can call you out the question to say, I didn't speak the language, I didn't know what you were talking about. So if you don't have what is it to be a Lutheran, and again, I'm not a pastor, obviously, and I'm not an expert, but this is something that you should incorporate. We do it at Concordia, and we have a 7-hour orientation training, and 45 minutes of that orientation is what is it to be Lutheran? What is the Lutheran faith? Because they don't know, and that's the language that we speak, and we are governed by the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. And what does that mean for ELCA versus Lutheran Church Missouri Synod versus Wales? I mean, it's just so much out there to be interpreted in their own language. If you don't, make a stand and tell them that this is our mission statement, this is where we stand. So it's a 45 minutes, sometimes it goes an hour because they have questions back, especially when it pertains to chapel or on Wednesdays. Can I commune or can I not commune? Do you have open communion? You have closed communion. So for a Christian to come in to Concordia, or for that matter, when I was a principal in Baltimore or Chicago, some people will ask, so when you have communion on Wednesdays, do I come forth, or, because on Sundays I can't, but on Wednesdays can I? So yeah. So you have to make that difference, because that's where we find ourselves in policies and procedures. So let's continue here. And stop me at any point if you have questions. So Policies and procedures. You need policies and procedures for the simple reason that without them, nothing can be achieved. Organizations will plunge into chaos without them, and daily operations will halt. Policies and procedures reflect the way an organization operates. So that's why I asked. When I was a principal in Chicago at my second school, St. John Lutheran School, in Forest Park, that's near Chicago, Concordia, Chicago. And I was there the year that the congregation voted to close the school. Have anyone been a part of closing the school? So what year was it, sir, Pastor? Okay, so trying to think, when did we close St. John Forest Park? That was right, went to Baltimore after that, so JJ was 2008. So we had to do a teach out. I don't know if you close a school, you just can't say that we're closing. And I know that back when my dad was a pastor in Chicago, when the school closed, it was like, thank you for your service, but we're done at the end of the school year. Now you have to do a whole teach out. Teach out means your procedures have to be, if someone's in 6th grade, how are they going to get to 8th grade? Because their parents said, this is what I expected. It's for my child to stay here to 8th grade. So what are you going to do for me? So sometimes a teach out is compensation. Sometimes a teach out is teaching them the half a year or whatever compromise you can come up with. So if you are faced with that, a school closure or ending, just know that it's not a got you, but the policies and procedures need to be in place so that you will be able to carry out the plan for that employee. Sometimes a church or a school will close because they just don't have the money. But that's not the reason of that person saying, that's not what I signed up for. So you have to do a teach out and you have to do a severance package. So if you don't have that in place, I suggest that you talk to the church council or your school board to say, if we're faced with this, if we're faced with someone that needs long-term disability, are those measures in place? So when you do your new hire orientation, make sure that the individuals are aware of the health benefits. You know, what does health benefits mean? I've been a part of a school when I was a teacher where I did not know what I didn't know, that the church obviously was supporting the school, and the church could not afford our insurance, so it lapsed. So that was in the 80s. We just had to buy a pack of straws and suck it up because that's where we find. But not now. People will come after you, and they will say, this is what I was entitled to, so you have to pay it out. So that's why I said that the organizations will plunge into chaos without them, and daily operations will halt. So if you just have a church only, do you have employees at your church? Secretary? Tell me some of the other. Organists, janitorial services. So let's get to, I don't have a slide for that, but a checklist. So if you're not conducting, and I know that this may sound like, oh, now she's being very corporate. If you're not doing a background check, a simple $37.50, that's how much it used to be. I don't know how much it is now, or in New Jersey, New York. This was, I'm talking when I was in Chicago. We did just a general criminal background check so that if you're called out or if that person has had any past, you will become aware of that. The generic one is a fingerprint. Do you do that? Fingerprint and a general background check. So if you're not doing that with all of your employees, that procedures and policies need to be in place so that you're protected. You're protected, and especially when it comes to a school, if it's a janitor, if it's an organist, that everyone knows not all of your business, but at least you have a general baseline to start with. So that is what I wanted to say about the check-off list applications. We didn't do applications in the 80s when I started teaching. It was like, okay, your dad is such and such. Okay, we have this grade open. Can you teach this grade? And what what extras can you do, what special activities can you do, but now you really need to go through a formal process, even if it's a committee of 3, so that that person can't come back and say, you didn't hire me because of X, Y, Z, or I was hired because of X, Y, Z. So policies and procedures, the problems for organization is they often struggle to define 3 key elements: policy, process, and procedure. And what do I mean by that is, what is the policy, especially when it comes to church and school? And sometimes it's flip-flop. The school is supporting the church is supporting the school. And I really suggest that if you don't do a mini retreat with the church council and the school board, then that needs to be in place as well. It could be a 4-hour, it could be a half-day retreat, so that you have the policies, the process. How are we going to carry out this policy, and what are the procedures? And I don't know, in your various congregations, it may differ. You may be at Bethlehem Lutheran for 1 year and get 3 weeks vacation, where at Ebenezer, you're there for 5 years and you get half a week. So it varies. So you want to make sure that the policy and the process of how we're going to carry out the procedures. And while I'm talking about procedures, fair is fair. And I've been guilty. I stand before you and say, I've been guilty when it comes to Lutheran teachers of saying, okay, you're sick today, so go on home.
Oh, thank you.
You're going home, I'm going to take your class.
Oh, perfect.
And I'm not going to record it. Yeah. And then I'm not consistent. You get to go home half day. Just make sure you put in that half day. So I'm guilty for that. I'm guilty for not playing favorites, but knowing that this person, this Lutheran school teacher, is sacrificing a whole lot. And not that she's not, but the process, I could have been fired at the type of process that I had when I became a principal in Chicago, because it was selective. Selective amnesia, selective favoritism, selective with, okay, you came from Teach America, and I know that Teach for America, they have their own policies and procedures. So I can say, okay, you go ahead and put your time in, but you go ahead, I'll take your class, because I knew that it wasn't an even playing field. So our policies and procedures were jacked up because we didn't align ourselves with Teach for America. We just knew we needed a first grade teacher, and they were offering help. But our policies and procedures were like this, and this person got extra pay for doing after school care, $30 an hour, when a Lutheran school teacher, $10. That, all day long, it's a $20 difference, an hour. So if your policies and procedures are crossways, then I suggest that you do please have a retreat so that you're getting on the same board of how you're going to carry out the process for your policies and procedures. Some of my slides may be redundant, so I may skip over some of them. So the policy, the list of rules or the framework for a task, define your organization's culture and regulations. A policy is concise, formal statement that outlines the governing principles and intentions. And rules, you can, you can't, you can, you can't. So you want to just make sure that your policy is really tight and that the process and the procedure is carried out. Any questions so far? Okay. So policies and procedures. I stated some of these already. So the one that I want to really home in on is the training and orientation. It is essential that you have some type of orientation with your employees. And you're going to talk about bullying and harassment? Okay, so in your training, in your orientation training, you want to talk about something that the church is not good on talking about. Are you talking about sexual harassment? Okay, so I won't steal your thunder. But it's something that we don't like to talk about, but you have to talk about it. And we have to deal with it because sexual harassment exists. and you will hear more about that later today about what constitutes sexual harassment, what constitutes bullying, what constitutes hostile work environment, and how you're going to carry that out. So how you're going to carry it out with Billy is the same way you have to carry it out with Maggie. And just make sure that you carry that through with your training and orientation up front so they would know, here is the policy. This is what we define sexual harassment, bullying, hostile work environment. You get a whistleblower? No? Are you going to talk about whistleblower? Okay. So in your training and orientation and process mapping and process owner, all of this full-scale orientation, you want to talk about the bullying and harassment. A whistleblower is when we're seeing a little bit of that in our government. I'm just going to be honest. I mean, it was a whistleblower, and when I know from an HR aspect, when they say they were going to identify the whistleblower, I said, boy, they're tiptoeing down a dangerous road, because that person can get paid a whole lot for the rest of their lives because you just outed them. It's like very hostile work environment. But a whistleblower is a person that comes with a complaint, and of course you have to do your due diligence and do an investigation as you're seeing this carried out in our government. But that is one of the underlining bullying, harassment, hostile work environment. It can get escalated to a whistleblower. Usually when someone puts a whistleblower complaint in and they're reporting to, give me your name.
James.
So they're reporting to James. Monique is reporting to James. I put a whistleblower in. To protect me until the investigation is done, they would pull me from under and place me with someone else so that there's due diligence in the investigation. And whistleblower complaint can go from hostile work environment to unfair treatment to harassment, bullying, and you can touch on that, or you will touch on that. But if you don't have that in your orientation and training, that is something that it must be talked about. I mean, how do you talk about sexual harassment with someone that doesn't want to talk about it? At Concordia, all students have to go through sexual harassment training. And we have a partnership with Sarah Chenier and their Jewish women. And they politely told us, no, thank you. And we politely said, this is the law. And they said, we don't need sexual harassment because it doesn't exist. Yes, it does, because someone can come from any site, and you need to know how to identify and define sexual harassment. So in the church, we don't like to talk about it, but I challenge you again, if you didn't do it, get your team together. There are a lot of videos. As a matter of fact, at Baltimore Lutheran, the board was split. We don't want to talk about it, or just have them sign something. They can just read something and have them sign it. So we came up with a video, and we got it from YouTube. And they watched the video, and they signed off on it so that we were in compliance with the state. Yes? Mm-hmm. Yeah, usually it's every two years that you have to, but every year. Yeah. Yeah, and then in a smaller Lutheran sector, we would call it a refresher course where you'll watch a video. But at Concordia, it's every year for the sexual harassment. But you go through a whole, you said 8 hours? Yeah. Yeah. Wow. So they're making sure they're in compliance, and then you have to sign off and. Wow, I learned something new. 90 above. Whoa, okay. Wow, well, I mean, they're doing a great job with the 8 modules, and then you have to do a 90% or more. That's good. So I'm going to stop here and talk about policies. What do I need to know? Guidelines and standards. So let's take a pause here and open it up for some dialogue. What policies are new for your church or school? Can anyone share? I have a mic. What policies that when you started, you thought that, we don't need to have this policy, but now it's a policy and it's a procedure that maybe changed over the last 5, 10 years? Yeah. Say more about that. School? Is it school or church?
School,
yeah.
But,
What grade?
Well, we're preschool, early childhood, but
Yeah.
you have to have a policy because everybody's on it, everybody's posting, so being aware that you're representing the church and the school at all times, with regardless of what you're doing.
Yeah.
And keeping in mind that once it's out there, there's no taking it back.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
I mean, besides just protecting the kids of who could be photographed or not photographed, but even more so just your own personal, on your personal
Yeah.
Facebook page, no matter what, you're walking away, always a representation of the school and church.
Exactly. Speaking of social media, my last year in Baltimore, being a principal, is where the whole iPhone, the screenshotting and the video, it was a nightmare. And I can just imagine, even at the preschool level. And we did the whole handbook, the student handbook that you have to sign off on. Can you be photographed or not? And you have to say, okay, this is a foster child, so this child can't be in this photograph. And you do have to be careful. Even with me stepping down from Concordia this past May, I am listed as a volunteer at Concordia. So my Facebook, all my social media is still monitored by Concordia, and I still represent Concordia as First Lady, as the wife of the president. So you do have to be very careful. Who else has a social media policy? Or is it just, is it a policy, or is it just spoken that you should not? Can you say more about that? Okay. So is there a firewall put up for students? For teachers, okay. Okay. We had a case that it was a student that thought it was cute to go on a porn site, and there's a firewall, and it alerted us. And when you have to bring the parents in and say they were trying to go to the site, sometimes those meetings don't go so well, that maybe they just did one little button. Maybe they just typed in the wrong word. No, let me tell you what they typed in. Let's talk about what they really typed in. So you do have to have social media policies and procedures in place. Any other new policies that you may not? Yes.
So we're putting in surveillance cameras into the school and in the classroom, so I'm probably going to have to do a policy on, who can access those videos,
Yeah.
because it's not parents, just ad board,
Yeah.
probably pastor and myself only. When we would be accessing them if it was a complaint.
Yes.
And also, we have water days preschool, so the children will go in a classroom and behind screens they'll change. We'll have to shut the cameras off for that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought up the camera. My last position, I know someone raised their hand back here. I'll get to you one moment. I was over all the student life at Concordia. And you do have to be very careful of who has access to the cameras and where you can place a camera and where you cannot place a camera. So you can have a camera coming into the dorm, but it had to be angled in such a way that as soon as that female or male hit the door to their hall, to where they're living, if you could see just a skosh in that hall, then you're not in compliance. Then that's infringing on their privacy. You can't have it anywhere where they sleep or where they take a shower or in the restroom. So just be mindful of that. And you do have to be mindful of when to shut the cameras off. And that can lead down a path of, now you're monitoring cameras. Now you're spending your day on, off. But sometimes you need the cameras in order to, yes. You wanted to?
We had to put in a policy about our Facebook page, as you did. Our policy is we do not show any child's face. That's it. We will show the back of children,
Yeah.
that kind of thing, but no child's face.
Yeah.
That's it.
And that's a good policy to put in place. Then that way you don't have to decipher and say, okay, Billy, why don't you come with me and Nancy and Sue? Let's go take a walk while they take their classroom picture. It shocked me. Yes. Yes. For the pastors that have schools, do you know that these policies are in place? Yeah. Yeah, I was going to say that it shocked me this week to see a Lutheran school teacher, innocent, but took a full-blown picture of the classroom, and I said, wow, she has 100%. But then again, I don't know. I'm not in her classroom. I don't know if 3 students were pulled out. But the social media platform is one that is sticky, and it's also very tough to manage. And if you don't know the little secret, I'll tell you, even as adults, they have a fake book and a Facebook. And because they want their freedom of speech. Some people will create an account with a sunshine or water or just a generic one so they can have their freedom of speech. So I will say that when in doubt, leave it out. When in doubt, just don't log. When you're tempted to say something, just do the old book. Just journal it and put it under your mattress somewhere. Because it can really come back. The whole social media, and social media is social media. That's Instagram, that's Facebook, that's MySpace. I know that's dating, but it's going, social media is social media. Because sometimes students and teachers will say, well, what is social media? The internet is social media. Yeah, anything. So I think that's a great policy of taking students with their backs and just all students.
Nobody's face. If by chance there's a child off to the side, we put a smile face over that child or
Yeah.
whatever it
Yeah.
has to be, but no face.
Yeah. And you're what grade? Are you K through 8? Preschool. Who's K through 8? No K through 8. So we just all preschool. Okay. K. Yes, sir. Yes. Yeah, lockdown, active shooter. Are you doing? Yeah. So if you have not done lockdown, where's your meeting place for your preschoolers? Do you have the, I'm really dating myself, the rope that they hold on to? What do you use now? Is it still, okay, or rings, or rope? So what is the meeting place and the active shooter? And I'm sorry to say that sometimes parents don't get along. Do you know what parent, and I know it's a lot to keep up with, but the father has this weekend, the mother has this weekend, the father is not allowed, the mother is not allowed, the grandmother's not allowed. So you have to, once they tell you this information, you have to carry out your policies and procedures to not let dad in. If you see dad at the Christmas program, you have to find some kind of way to escort him out if he's not allowed to be around, or mom is not allowed.
That's why it's so important for us to have good communication and a rapport with our police departments. I have a nursery worship service. I call the police department and say, I would like a uniform. I hate this now, they're wearing khakis, whatever, but I want a uniformed police officer
Yeah.
at church for me. And they'll send somebody to stand in the back of church.
Yeah.
Lots of times it's a parent. If we have a parent who's a police officer, I say to him, look, can you please have a uniform to stand?
Yeah.
I think it's important for churches in general. You have to have a good rapport with your police.
Yes. And in a larger city, I know that's can be complicated, and I just hate that we're in the times that we're in, but yeah, we have to do the active shooter, your safe meeting space, bomb threat. And if you don't have these policies and procedures, then you're in reactive mode. And reactive mode is the worst mode to be in when you have to explain to a parent or a guardian, we didn't have this in place, or we didn't do this training, or we will get to it after. And I'm guilty of this. We get to it after Christmas. We're just going to do that after Christmas. So I think that is so important to have a good rapport with your police department, or have someone that can represent you at the police department that can show up, especially when you have large gatherings, because you don't know. Sometimes this teacher may not know that the father can't have any contact. So communication is key. You're not trying to put anyone on blast or tell their business, but when it comes down to the safety of a child or domestic violence with your teachers, it exists. And communication is so key that when you do your training or orientation, say if there is a problem, you don't have to disclose everything, but I'm having some concerns at home, and I would rather not have my husband come here. I would like to be notified if you see him on a camera or something like. They don't have to disclose everything to you, but communication is key. Any other new policies? Did you? Yes, I'm sorry. Yeah, because I'm like just holding it and talking. Any other new policies, or you want to talk about a policy that you just implemented? Please share. Yes. Okay, I'm handing the mic.
Well, I would say, because I'm sitting right next to them, paternity and maternity leave
Yeah.
for our staff. So as our staff demographic has changed a bit, that has become something that now is significant to us.
Yeah, I think that is that's a shift. The paternity leave is just as important as a maternity leave. It wasn't back when I had my child. My youngest is 25. That was not the case. Paternity. What, Pastor? You're going to be in church on Sunday. I remember purposely my husband talking to the doctor. She has to have the baby on Friday. And I was like, natural process? He's like, no, we're going to have it on Friday. And can she get discharged on Saturday afternoon because I have to be in church on Sunday? And Dr. Adelman looked at him like, no, he said, no, I'm serious. So paternity is a shift, and you have to honor that now, especially if it's good for the mom, it's good for the dad. So, yeah, yes, sir.
Just switching gears a little bit, but when we were on the active shooter in the police department, in Westwood, we have the police have 16 patrol cars. They carry 32 keys. There's a school key and a church key in every police car. And and our school is always, the doors are always locked. At church, when we start worship, the elders now have implemented and we have put it in practice that at worship, 15 minutes after worship starts, the doors are locked. You can always get out, but you can't get in.
Wow. Yeah. So on Sunday mornings, 15 minutes after the service begins, the doors are locked. So
I'd lock the doors after you collect the offering,
or right before, right before it is locked down. So, so let me ask about the locking of the doors. So if Molly and Billy, they're running late because they're infant, can they knock? Okay. Okay. Wow.
Some people forget, and then they say, Pastor, I came to church and I was locked out. I said, well, this is our problem. We printed it all.
Yes. Why? Wow. Okay. Yes. Hello. Good morning.
Before you lock your doors, make sure they have panic hardware so you can get out in an emergency.
So you have a crash bar. Yeah. So you got to put the crash bar so that if they're running towards the door, then, yeah, just like I see the crash bars back here. Yes.
All of your schools have to have these policies in place already. They also have to have policies of how to protect the people. But how many of those policies, and this is why we ask lay leaders to be here, carry over to Sundays, during the week meetings that are happening at your church? Are you using any of these? And you need to be aware of these. And if you need help with these policies, the crisis management team is in every police department, and they're willing to help you come up with a plan that works for your school as well as your church, and you need to be aware. One of the things that happened out in Joplin, Missouri, they were not prepared for the weather, and then tornadoes hit, and nobody knew what to do.
Yeah.
So there's a synod-wide effort to get everybody prepared for various emergencies that could occur. In our own experience, last day my husband was preaching in Illinois, somebody was dying at the back of the church, literally dying. And what do you do in that situation? Do you stop the service? Do you help that person? Do
Yeah.
you let people? You need to have policies in place to help you.
Yes, Pastor.
One of the things that New Jersey State offers is a review of your facilities. Law enforcement officers in New York State, as well as local, work with the federal government to provide funds to assist you in upgrading your facility to make it safe. And what they did at Our Savior was the state came, as well as the local PD, and they actually will go through your facility to see those areas that are a concern and those areas that are sufficient for anything like an active shooter, for folks getting in and out of the building. Maybe cameras need to be placed in certain areas, and they'll work with you with that. But also, and it's a long process. It's not an easy process, because what you could do is you have to have, to upgrade to that level that they say you should be at, you have to have at least 3 vendors that you then offer to the state, and they approve one, and then you can have that work done. But that money can come in through the federal government for you, because I know, what many people might be thinking is that, well, how am I going to ever upgrade my facility to make it safe when we can't afford to pay, the pastor and the organist? So there is funds that are available, and I can get some of that information to the district office and work that out so that people can access that.
What kind of grants? Chef. Yeah. Okay. Pastor, are these cameras for worship, or these are alarm cameras, or both? But if something happens, they will be for you. Yeah. I mean, but still, these cameras project somewhere. Is it recording? Okay. Okay. Oh, I see it. Yeah. Yeah, she just pointed. Okay. Yeah, okay. I see it now. It was hiding. Yeah, I think that it is, and I'm redundant and repeating myself, but if the school or the church does not know the policies and procedures, vice versa, and you're crossing each other, that's why it's good to have this mini retreat, so that, and you make sure that you're going through all of the drills, even if you just have a secretary or organist. If they're practicing for Sunday and there's an active shooter or there's a tornado or there's a hurricane, they need to be covered too. Where is the safe space to meet? So even if you have a staff of 2 or 3, it's still important that you go back, and it's not too late to correct it, but it needs to be done, especially in the schools. If you don't have those drills documented, then go back and do those. So again, policies and procedures, I think we stated a lot of these already. I do have some scenarios that we can go through, and then we can take a early break, and you guys, or keep going to your next presenter. But I think that we covered all of these 6 points. So let's go to our next slide. So scenario 1. So if we could have some participation on this would be great. I tried to switch it up, so it may, yeah, I see I did. So it may be a little space off or two, like Pat at the end. So you are overseeing a department of 25 people. One of your employees comes to you and complains about Pat's unpleasant body odor and how difficult it is to work in the same area. You agree to talk to Pat. So this is a real scenario, and the person has body odor. And the person has a body odor because they are not of the same tradition or background that you're from, and that is healthy for them, and they don't see a problem. Pat doesn't see a problem with his unpleasant odor, and you know this ahead of time. So what do?
Take a call.
That's one way. So how do you handle? So I threw a curveball that that is his tradition to oftentimes maybe 3 days out of the week goes without deodorant. And this person saying that this is infringing, now this is an insult to my nose. So how are you going to handle that? I need your help. How the associate pastor deal with, okay.
I think one of the things is that I would have to have a conversation with Pat to understand the tradition and understand why this is part of of his tradition or her tradition, whatever Pat is, and figure out then the means by which how we can serve and work together with folks of a different tradition who find it to be offensive versus his tradition that this is acceptable.
Yeah.
That's where we'd start.
I didn't have this problem as a principal or dean. I had it with the students complaining about another student. So what do? You have to bring the parent in. And that was the case, that is their tradition, not to bathe every day and not to have deodorant. I said, but you have to understand, this is where we are, and it's insulting to some and offensive to others. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I think we started this whole thing like policy and procedure. Okay, like coming to the school, or let's say the school, is a whole procedure set up that we have to be, put ourselves in place to be there. And so if your tradition says that you cannot shower maybe 3 days in a week, but you could also be encroaching on somebody, right?
Yeah, right.
And so that where the school said, hey, look, this is what we stand for.
Yes.
This is what we stand for. And so everyone that come here have to be like this. This is our procedure. So then, if you can cope with it, you be there.
Right.
And if you can,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, and you're exactly right. It becomes a policy and procedure, and your policy can be that this is a healthy environment. In order to have a healthy environment, X, Y, Z has to occur, and then we have to have an ABC conversation if X, Y, Z is not being carried out. So, anyone else want to take a shot at scenario? I'm coming.
It's not that big of a deal, but at my age, I can still remember in grades 3, 4, and 5, there's a kid named Harry. And Harry stunk to high heaven. Nobody wanted to sit by him or stand in line by him, including me. But I knew that that was a bad way to be, but I still remember him to this day. And why he didn't go home and tell mom, like, I need to bathe. Nobody wants to be here because I stink. I don't get it. I don't get it.
Yeah.
But this is just a cause for bullying.
Yeah.
Back in those days, nobody cared about bullying.
Yeah.
That was just called peer pressure.
Yeah, it was Frank. My student was Frank, and Frank was a part of the neighborhood. So my mom and dad fixed that problem because they didn't have water. The water wasn't on. Okay. So we were in a whole different ball game with my dad being so active in the community that Frank is smelling really badly. So when mom and dad went over there, they found out they didn't have water.
If you're dealing with someone and you're having these conversations, my question is, how many of you actually write down that you had this conversation,
Oh, you better.
especially if it's with an employee, and you have to document it?
Oh, yeah.
Especially if you're, as an educator, as a preschool director,
Yeah.
anytime you're talking with someone about those kind of issues or anything that's in your policy manual, you have to document it. And they have to sign off on it. If they refuse
Yeah.
to sign off on it, you have to put that
I
down
was
as well.
going to say that when you document it, make sure that the person that you're talking to reads it and you give them time. You don't. I generally will give them 24 hours to absorb it, and they can come back with it signed or not. And we just have to say that I'm gonna bring a witness in that you refuse to sign, or a witness in that we're both agreeing to sign it. And that person doesn't even have to read it. Just witness that I'm putting refusal to sign, and are we in agreement with that? Yes or no? So usually, assistant principal or a pastor will sit in. That's already privy to the sensitive nature that we're talking about. All right, so let's go to scenario 2. Again, I apologize if it didn't. All right, so you recently had a new policy, a no smoking policy in the school or facilities. All employees are notified of the policy change. It was not well received at all. As you walk down the hall, you see a cloud of smoke and then Chris walking away. You need to talk to Chris or not. Do you wait to see who's smoking, or do you talk to Chris because Chris was near the smoke? Talk to Chris?
Talk to Chris and see what he saw, or she.
Yes. Okay, so talk to Chris and not accuse, but question. As in, I need your help. Yeah, where's the smoke coming from? Okay. And what if Chris say, I didn't see any smoke? What are you talking about? In some cases, you have to leave it alone because you didn't see Chris with the cigarette or whatever the cloud of smoke was. You could smell them. Outside, yeah, he could have been smoking on his way in. This is a sticky one. Yes.
Also, even where the person is smoking,
Yeah.
is it within 20 to 30 feet of a school building? You know, if they're outside smoking, is there a designated spot to smoke?
Yes, and we had, I don't know if I muted this or not. Thank you. At Concordia, she just turned it back on. At Concordia, we have areas, smoking areas that you can smoke, and that was the toughest thing that I had to do at Concordia because of, and I'm not giving anyone a get out of jail free card, but international students, when there's a language barrier and they're coming and English is a second language, you have to show them sometimes that this is a smoking area, because not every bench around campus is a smoking area. And they were sitting on the bench and said, okay, this is not the smoking area. You have to see the cigarette, you see the red circle with the line, that means you can't smoke here. So you do have to be patient, especially when it's a new policy. But the key was, it was not well received. So someone's being belligerent. And you're right, they're not within the guidelines hallway, so some would say that if I didn't see Chris with the cigarette or the smoking device or the vaping, go figure. That's a whole nother policy and procedure, the vaping.
So I have a sensitive issue around this policy. If I have a preschool teacher that smokes and then comes in and smells like smoke, the parent can complain about second, third-hand smoke,
Yeah.
which is a real thing, I believe.
Right. Yeah.
So how do I discuss with that teacher that they need to spray themselves or do something, because
Yeah. Yeah, that's difficult because that's on their own time, and they were in the guidelines, 20, 30 Probably smoked on the way to the school building. But you have to call it out if the parent, it is a sensitive issue. And I have a very sensitive nose. So smoke to me in general, I can pick it up right away, and I have to check myself and say, okay, do you want to approach this? Is someone complaining, or this is just your personal thing that you just don't want to smell it? But if a parent or a student said, I smell smoke, somebody been smoking, Miss Betty been smoking, and you may have to, it's sensitive. How would you deal with that? When she's within the guidelines, she's smoking or he or she is smoking on the way in, how do you deal with that when a student or parent is complaining?
Yeah. One thing, I think one thing that we need to know is that I work with the school system, and I know what the school stands for, okay? And the school is a business, and they need to run their business. And I apply to the school. I need to abide with the guideline of the school. And so I need to take my pack of cigarette, and I know that I'm spending, and it's not giving me a paycheck. And so I can decide whether to smoke and go to school. And the principal comes to me and says, hey, look, this is what's happening. And you posing a threat to the operation of the school. And now, this is where we need to, have Jesus on our tongue, how to present this issue to this person. And this person can either decide to either take the pack of cigarette and then forget about the school. That's an easy way too.
Yeah, but it is a sensitive. It is very sensitive because she has a right to now a student being a high school principal. Wow, that's all I can say is wow, because you got to catch them. Okay, come on in, Derek. I'm smelling the smoke on you.
Yeah, right. One of the issues I think that you spoke about earlier is a retreat and the fact of having open communication. And I think when we have an institution, either if it's just a parish or a parish and a school, is to have ongoing communication. And that ongoing communication is not just a gathering time in which we talk and discuss issues, but a gathering time around the Word of God. So often in the Scriptures we hear about, especially through St. Paul, that you have the freedom to do X, Y, or Z, but if your freedom causes offense to a brother or sister in Christ, you refrain from that so that the body of Christ can be built up. And I think that if we have that open communication with our institutions on a regular basis, so that the staff recognizes that we're about, shining with the light of Christ to those that we serve, even one to another, it helps in conversations and when issues like this do occur and come up, because it's not a new thing that someone's hearing. It's not something where they're feeling as if they're being attacked, but we're about doing what we're doing so that the body of Christ can be built up. And one of the key things, too, as well, is as leaders in the church, we have to be open and willing to then either alter or change a behavior or something that we're doing that might cause offense for the weaker brother or sister, so that the goal, which is to lift up Christ and to have one another grow in Christ, occurs and takes place.
Yeah, not to put my dad on blast, but I will.
He not knows.
No, So my dad, I clearly remember him smoking his pipe in his office in the church. And I clearly remember, I graduated from high school in '85. They moved to St. Louis in '86. It was somewhere in the early '80s that he refrained from smoking in the church. We lived in a parsonage, like hop, skip, and a jump right from the church, but he would only smoke in the house. And we as children had to approach him and say that this is a cloudy mess. I mean, now you bring it in, not in your office, but you bring it at home. So we had to have that conversation with Dad. Not that we stopped him from smoking, but eventually he did. But when the pastor's smoking in the office, I don't know if that still happens, but I clearly remember my dad doing it. Sorry.
Yeah, I think how you approach this issue too with people is, especially for a school, sometimes we get, we think of ourselves only as gospel proclaimers or educators, and we forget that these parents are customers too. And so it can be a customer service issue, and how we approach people generally as pastors or as churches or as schools, and recognize that we have a job to do with the gospel. It makes it a lot more difficult if smell on a teacher is precluding that, if there's something else going on.
Yeah.
And it is kind of a customer service issue too. It's why we clean our parking lots. It's why we vacuum our floors.
Yeah.
Those sorts of things too. And that's also how I think we can approach that. And that's not just a one-on-one conversation. That's a culture that's kind of built around this idea of how best do we
Best practices.
for how
best
we
practices.
reach out to people.
And Pastor Taylor is right, is about the communication in the many retreats, is to have that open dialogue. Did I see another hand? Yes, sir.
So I actually work for a law firm in which we deal with employment discriminations and so forth. Not that that's my department, so I have no expertise in that at all. But one of the things you might also want to make sure is that your policies and procedures are regularly looked at by an attorney. I don't know if the district has an attorney that helps with different churches and makes sure that the procedures are in line with current state laws and regulations. But there's, especially with like the smoking issue, there's been different case law that addresses some of that stuff, and sometimes it's a mixed result. But you want to make sure that your policies and procedures are actively looked at and reviewed to make sure that you're in compliance and to make sure that you're up to date, because, as you know, a lot of things have changed even in the last couple decades where the policies have changed.
Yes.
You have to keep up with
And you're exactly right. The last 3 institutions that I worked for, we had legal counsel. And at Concordia, we have an attorney that's full-time. So it's easy to just run up and say, can you read this? But if you don't, that's a great point to get someone in the congregation or a parent that's a lawyer to get a third eye on it, to make sure that you're not setting yourself up for a discrimination lawsuit. Because that I don't even think that would be a question for someone to get a settlement, especially with our tight budget. So I think I have the 10:30, right? Okay, I think I have one more scenario, and then we will close and wrap it up. Let's see, which one did I pick? Or I did not. Okay, so we can. So we covered, I'll just go ahead and put all 4 up because we covered it as we talked. The tone of your voice, is it calm, is it firm? Listen to see if the supervisor sounds apologetic. What type of physical posture, sitting up straight, shoulder square with the employee, not turning away? What level of eye contact are you as the supervisor or the employee? You looking directly at the employee? Or looking elsewhere. Many people avoid eye contact, when confronting others or delivering an uncomfortable message. Number 3 is very hard. You have to be comfortable being uncomfortable when you're dealing with employee, especially when you have a tight-knit community and you have to approach a situation, or 2 people not getting along, or this person is showing up to work constantly. Number 3 is very important. All of them, but number 3 is, making sure that the delivery is fair and firm. What level of engagement does the supervisor want to be there? He or she is distracted or engaged in the conversation with the employees. So just some tips for you if you want to take a screenshot of those 4 tips. There are more out there, but those are the 4 that I chose. So do we have any closing remarks before I show the last, I'll explain the last video, and yes.
More than anything else, you need to have a policy and procedure of how somebody can make a complaint. Very important. Do they go to that person first? Do they go to their superior first? Do they go to the pastor first, or do they go directly to the school board? Do they go directly to the church council? There has to be a procedure in place of how to deal with that. So that's like one of the first ones you should have.
And it's with text with tech-savvy individuals, it's usually on the front of your website. File a complaint. For schools, it could be Title IX. It could be, you could have a drop-down menu. I suggest that you look at some larger schools if you want to see how they address how to make a complaint, especially if it's a complaint about the pastor or the principal. Then do they have measures or policies, procedures in place to go directly to the board? And it's really not directly to the board, because if they're doing the model of governance, then you can't go to any board member. So you have to make sure that those policies and procedures are in place as to who would they go to on the board, so that you're not calling everyone, just going down the list, whoever answers the phone. There's a policy and procedure in place for that. And it's usually right there on your website if they want to file a complaint. And then there's a drop-down menu as to what's the nature of the complaint. And then who receives the complaints? Is it just a principal pastor? Is a pastor, and then the pastor will delegate? Or so you have to make sure those procedures are in place as well. So I'm glad you pointed that out.
And also there's a new rule, well, not new, it's been about 5 years, no idling in your parking lots. If the state comes in and sees lots of cars idling in your parking lot and you have children around, that's against the law. And also smoking, that issue, it's 500 feet from your building. And all churches and schools in the state of New Jersey, because of insurance, should have a sign that says no smoking inside the building anywhere. And it's supposed to be 500 feet from the building. But also the Synod has a template that you can use and have to put New Jersey laws into it.
Yeah.
And they have resources there as well. And also the Lutheran Legal Council out of Florida, Georgia, also is willing to help us out. But if you have lawyers in your congregations, Lutheran Legal Council is looking for somebody because they have no one in New Jersey.
Oh, okay. That was a good plug. All right. So in closing, I want to show a video that may or may not have anything to do with what we talked about, but I think it wraps or it ties into how we treat one another in Christ. And it's strangers. I don't know if you ever seen the video, and I wish I can share them with you. You have a thumb drive. I've already purchased all these videos, so I can share them with you. We have a thumb drive. It's too large to email. But this video is strangers, and it talks about how we are the body of Christ, good or bad. But in this case, how the message of Christ is reached to these two individuals that would never meet, but one was introduced to Christ because of the other person, but they would never meet. You'll see the ending, and then I'll close with the song. But before I show the video, thank you so much for being open and collaborative effort to get through the morning. I know that you have a great session coming up. Probably not great topics, but a great presenter. So again, thank you for your warm welcome, and I say God bless you. Just give me one moment to pull it up. Okay, if I can't find it, I have another video. It's staring me right in my face. I don't have my glasses on. So if you see something that says strangers, let me, right here. Oh, I think you need to take it off of mute. All right, here we go.
This is Nate. Nate became a Christ follower 2 weeks ago and is still a bit giddy about it. Now he's trying not to do cartwheels in public. Nate became a believer partly because of Kim. Yet oddly enough, Kim and Nate have never met. How is this possible? Well, let's take a look. Kim loved Jesus from an early age, and in college she had a huge impact on her friends. While most of her peers used their college years to, well, experiment, Kim didn't. She remained committed to her faith, and it showed. It especially showed to Lisa, her roommate, who confessed to Kim that she wanted whatever it was that made Kim so strong. Kim shared her faith with Lisa, and Lisa believed. Years later, at Lisa's first real job, she met Thomas. Thomas was hit by a drunk driver when he was 13 and still carried a lot of anger and bitterness. Thomas and Lisa became friends, and it wasn't long before he started going to church with Lisa and her husband. After a lot of studying and searching, Thomas gave his life to Christ. Fast forward a few years. Thomas became a public speaker and was often asked to speak at large events. See, when he became a believer, Thomas developed a new perspective on life. He stopped resenting what had been taken from him and started being thankful for the second chance he had been given. On one particular day, Thomas shared about overcoming hardship and what it means to choose joy. He was so passionate that a number of people were inspired to share a link to his video. The video of Thomas inspired James, too. And if anyone needed inspiration, it was him. James had a ton of issues. He spent most of his life as a passive husband, an absent father, and a horrible friend. That said, no one disliked him more than he disliked himself. But everything changed the night he happened to watch Thomas online. Something clicked and he knew what he had to do. He surrendered his miserable life to someone greater, and he was forever changed. James fought hard to make up for the lost years with his family, and he also began working with young men who were in danger of throwing their lives away. One of those men was Nate. Nate didn't really know his own dad, and he had no real direction in life, ultimately bouncing from one bad decision to another. Because of that, he often found himself in trouble with the law. No one had ever showed him what it looked like to be a real man. That is, until he met James. James became the first father figure Nate ever had. He learned about honesty, self-control, humility, and integrity, and where those traits come from. 2 months later, Nate publicly declared his belief in Christ, and of course, James was there. Now you can see the connection. Nate was impacted by James, who was influenced by Thomas. Thomas saw an uncommon joy in Lisa, who learned of Jesus from Kim. Kim's relationship with God eventually led to Nate's. Funny how these two people have never met and never will.
Started with talents, treasure, time, talents, and treasure. And I still say that we can touch lives and share the good news of Jesus Christ. Great is thy faithfulness, O God, my Father. There is no shadow of turning with thee. Thou changest not, thy compassion, they fail not. As thou hast been, thou forever will be. Summer and winter, and springtime and harvest, sun, moon, and stars in their courses above, join with all nature and manifold witness to thy great faithfulness, mercy and love, oh great is thy faithfulness. Great is thy faithfulness, morning by morning, new mercies I see. All I have needed, all your hand hath provided. Great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto me. Pardon for sin and a strength that endureth, thine own dear presence to cheer unto guide, strength for today and bright hope for tomorrow. Blessings are mine with 10,000 beside, oh greatest thy faithfulness. Great is thy faithfulness. Morning by morning, new mercies I see. Oh Lord, all I have needed, oh, your hand hath provided. Great is thy faithfulness. Great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto me. God bless your day. And you have 10 minutes.
You come up here to this mic, please, and that way you're coming up and it can be recorded, okay? Yes, my husband is like looking at me. What? Sit down. Just sit down. And the other thing that was brought to my attention also, if you're using cameras in your church and school, you should have that on a separate server, separate computer, so that it can't be taken out or anybody else looking at it. So just so that you know those two things. Okay, Pastor Kirk, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right, thank you so much. Welcome back, and thank you all for coming out today. Middle of November already, right? This brisk morning. I'm sure you have many things to do 2 weeks before Advent. And thanks to Monique for her words, getting us started and breaking into song, right? I wish I could do that, but alas, told her she ought to think about being on Broadway, you know? So that's who I am. And I come to you this morning by way of the middle thing. Lutheran Counseling Center of New York is where I do my pastoral psychotherapy, mental health counseling practitioner every Thursday at the Mineola office out on Long Island. My main vocational gig is Associate Professor of Pastoral Mental Health Counseling at Fordham, Rose Hill campus in the Bronx. And I'm also ordained Presbyterian minister. And if you know Presbyterian lingo, I'm what's known as parish associate. For those of us that do other things that are not primarily parish, it's a way of staying connected. At Scarborough, if you know Westchester, up the Hudson, between Tarrytown and Croton, roughly. And I live a little further up, just by way of background, Peekskill on the Hudson. So good to be with you today. My talk will be divided in 3 parts. We'll be talking, of course, about boundaries, boundary training, harassment, as Monique mentioned. In general, sexual harassment, what constitutes, how do we prevent? And then the first part here is going to be more laying the foundational to talk about boundaries and harassment. Fundamental principles that we have to be aware of in order to be increasingly mindful of boundaries, harassment, etc. So when it comes to ministry, I like to think of ministry as a calling and a profession. It's not either or, it's both and. And I say this, you know, I teach the Doctor of Ministry course in the Grad School of Religion at Fordham. And, you know, many of us come into this, you know, thinking of it, and rightly so, as a sacred calling, right? Called by God. Even those of you that think of your calling to be educators in a faith-based school. I'm not in the public school system. I'm in a religiously affiliated school. It's a calling, yes. And at the same time, it's a profession. And we've been touching on that already this morning. Things to be aware of. There are certain professional standards, ethical standards that we need to be mindful of. And you know, we see in the news again and again examples of clergy who think of it more as the former and not so much as the latter, getting into trouble, It's a calling. I'm called by God. I don't want to water that down with, ethical standards, professional things. But, it's walking that fine line. And I would argue that ministry is enhanced. It's truly enhanced by being professional, holding ourselves accountable to the highest standards. Calling and profession. I think another preliminary foundational principle is self-knowledge, right? And perhaps it's to state the obvious. Know thyself. How are you with people? And I know the Myers-Briggs thing that some of you are more extroverts, some of you more introverts. I'm always on those scales. I'm right down the line, like 0. I'm nothing, right? But be that as it may, we have to do a certain amount of relational social maneuvering, right? So how are we with our people skills? Is that something I do really well or need to grow in? How about my emotional intelligence, right? Know thyself. It's like the oracle at Delphi, if ancient Greece, right? The pilgrims would always go up to Delphi. And they asked her, like, what's the purpose of my life? And that would be her answer. Know thyself. Know thyself. Now you can go back to your home and live your life. And thy limitations, right? You have certain strengths, as do I. And you have areas of needed growth, as do I. So it's even-handed self-assessment, that this is what I do well, that this is really what I need to work on in my life. It's being emotionally and spiritually honest with ourselves. Know thyself, and it's knowing when we hit the wall. and even before we hit the wall, we feel it coming on. Right? So many of us want to go the extra mile for the cause of Christ. Good. That's wonderful. But the interesting thing is, you ever read those gospel narratives? He preaches, he teaches, he heals, he does this, he does that, and how does the passage end? He goes away for a while. He went away for a while. This is the Lord and Savior, for heaven's sake, right? He has to be doing it. So you do, certainly, and I do too, right? He goes away. What's he doing going away for a while? Recalibrating, recentering, recharging the battery, right? Which we have to be doing too. And the self-awareness piece reminds me of 12-step. And some of you, I'm sure, have 12-step groups in your parish, AA. Step number 4. Anyone know? Step number 4? Submit to a higher power. Well, that's 1. Or no, that's 2. I'm powerless, submit to a higher power. And then step 4, step back and do a thorough personal inventory, right? And the inventory isn't, well, this is like how I wish I would be, or how I want to be. It's how I am in this moment, and things I really need to pay attention to. And another principle preparatory to discussing boundaries, harassment training, is, and again, if this seems like, yeah, this is basic stuff, of course. Empathy, compassion, love, the great commandment, love one another, right? But the issue is, I mean, we find ourselves, and Monique was touching on this, that, you know, she's saying, I'm paraphrasing, that, you know, don't really like a lot of things that are going on in our present day and age. You know, we're so divided, right, as a society, as a world. This distrust of the other, are you one of us, or are you one of them? You know? And so there was, a few years ago, this longitudinal study, 30 years, solid data, that shows, by the way, they're in decline. Okay? 30-year longitudinal study of college students. And the most precipitous decline was in the last 10 years. And the authors of the study ponder that, like what's going on in society. Well, you know, it's a digital age, right? Sherry Turkle has said famously, we live more and more of our lives on the screen. So, and you know, social media, and how are we treating one another online, right? Bullying, cyberbullying, that's going up while this is going down, and this is something we really have to be intentional about, not take for granted. How do we cultivate empathy and compassion in this take no prisoners culture that we're in at the moment? How do we get here? How do we get out of here? How do we make the faith community a different reality, so we're not repeating what's going on out and about these days? Becoming a compassionate presence, right, with those in your care, whether they be congregants or school children. A compassionate presence, it doesn't mean you have to have all the answers, right? There's something to be said for theological knowledge, and I got a lot of that when I was at Princeton Seminary, right? Went into the parish, my head full of Augustine, Aquinas, Luther, Calvin. I knew it. And then I get out, and oh my goodness, you know, families in crisis. A couple's in crisis. What do I do? Help! We only did a little bit of pastoral care. Right? Now what do I do? And I had the right answers, the right theological answer, but so did Job's friends. Right? You know the story? I mean, was there ever anyone who suffered like Job and his friends come calling? I mean, when I'm going through a tough time, please. You know, what did you do wrong? Right? Do they have the right answer? Their theology is absolutely right. But they're more focused on that than being compassionate presence, empathic presence to him. Right? What did you do wrong? Come on, come clean, come clean. Right? I'm no worse than anyone else, he basically says. Cause and effect. You know the theological frame of reference. How do we be compassionate presence? And this I'll be talking about, and we'll be talking about this a little bit after lunch too. Self-care, right? How's that going for you? How's your self-care? You know, for me, some days it's better than others. Let's be honest, self-assessment. Building up a support network. Do you know where to turn when you're feeling it? You know, those moments of confusion. I'm you know, approaching burnout. I'm spent. help, right? Go away for a while. And do we have those we can check in with? A good therapist, pastoral counselor, spiritual director, supervisor, colleagues. So we're not going it alone. If we're going it alone, that's often a red flag. Right, and you know, Presbyterians like to talk about, maybe Lutherans too, being a connectional church. Let's disabuse ourselves of, you know, it's between me and the Lord. Well, it is, but you know, we're social and relational beings, right? That's how we're created to be that. And the rule of thumb is that we can only care for others to the same extent we're doing it for ourselves. Rule of thumb, so I can only accompany you in my pastoral care, my clinical practice, whatever it is. I can only walk as far as I've gone in my own growth and healing, whatever you want to call it. So do we have a support network? And know the warning signs, right? And I have to watch it within myself, starting to be cynical. You know, that's okay. You know, congregants, you know how they are. Never happy, right? Or anxious. You know, trying to preempt. Put out fires. Critical. I find myself being critical, irritable. That's when I need to do a timeout. Timeout. What's going on here? Oh, yes, it's been a while since I've had like a personal day. You know? Defensive, reactive, suspicious. Those are always telltale signs. So how are clergy doing with self-care in general? Good? You've seen the Duke Clergy Health Initiative of Methodists? And I did a talk on this at NYU Hospital a few years ago at the Brooklyn, when it was NYU Lutheran. The findings are rather alarming. So and I'll show you at some point, I don't know about this morning, but maybe this afternoon, a video clip of clergy who've been part of this health initiative, who I'm not doing well with my self-care help at Duke Divinity. Studies indicate that clergy are among the nation's most overworked. We could even put underpaid, right? The long hours and stress of the job weigh on their health and lead to many pastors failing to take care of themselves. How do I find time to go away for a while? There's so much to do. So the challenge is for the church as a whole. The health initiative says to reverse the trends. So the clergy have the space to attend to their well-being. And you know, so this is going on in the Methodist Church, trying to do it some in the Presbyterian. Hopefully you can do it, you know, in your corner of the Lutheran Church. And sometimes it means educating the congregation that I need, I need to be doing this. So I can't be at this event. I have to be doing this family thing or whatever it is, right? Okay, so that lays the foundation for talking about boundaries. Comments about what we've done leading up to that? All right. So let's start off when we talk about boundaries. A useful rule of thumb is that the pastoral relationship is one of unequal power. You know this, right? So let me reiterate. It's not a two-way street between equals. I get the priesthood of believers. We're all that. We're all children of God, right? But in a pastoral relationship, one of us is the caregiver and the other is the care receiver, right? So immediately that's makes it not a two-way street. There's an imbalance of power. That's just being aware of that. Yes, it's not to puff ourselves up with I am more powerful. It's not that. It's the office of pastoral leadership gives me a certain power, and I want to use that wisely in the care of this person, this congregation. We're at risk when we ignore or minimize that, right? When, like, pastoral interventions turn into, like, coffee chat. It's a professional relationship. Okay, so, just to start on that note, one of the unequal power. And in recent years, there's been greater attention to the issues of boundaries, right? You've been hearing more and more about it. You have to come to compulsory boundary training today. Issues of boundaries in ministry, because, sadly, the examples of misuse are going up, not down. Misuse of power, and then they have an adverse, if not devastating, impact on individuals, faith communities, and ultimately the cause of Christ. And I would argue that I really believe that those who are truly pathological and intentionally destructive are a minority, okay? Although, even so, can wreak havoc, as we've seen, right? In the news, that the vast majority of ministers serve with the best of intentions. I really believe that. Wanting to make a positive difference in the church, in the world, trying to operate with the highest spiritual and ethical standards. But even those of us who are well-intentioned, and I assume that's you in this room, well-intentioned. I try to be, right? I wake up every day. How do I do my best today, even though sometimes I fall short? We can still drift into unhealthy behaviors, finding ourselves in compromising situations. And sometimes, that surprise us, like, how did I get here? How did this happen? Whoa. And perhaps as important, how do I get out of here? Out of this situation, right? With the complexities of pastoral service, clergy can easily find themselves struggling with questions of what's good ministry? What constitutes good ministry, effective ministry, healthy ministry? How do I care for myself? What does it mean to be both pastor and person, which we are, right? Let's not forget the latter. And I say this in my pastoral care and counseling classes at Fordham, that I don't know of another vocation profession where the two are so interconnected. Right, you can do many things vocationally, but some jobs you can leave your personhood at home. Just show up, do your job, go home, collect your paycheck. But not when it comes to pastoral spiritual care, pastoral leadership. You know, the two are always there. My professional identity, who I am as a person. So how do healthy boundaries contribute to good ministry? Right? I mean, I could ask you, and off the top of your head, and how do healthy boundaries contribute to good ministry? I mean, some people think that, oh my goodness, you know, it constricts, straitjackets. I want to be fully myself in the Lord. How do healthy boundaries contribute to good ministry, healthy ministry? Well, first, they're not simply thou shalt not. Right, there are some of those, the thou shalt not. They can remind us to avoid huge missteps, egregious missteps even, such as sexual misconduct. But they're primarily designed to help us connect to people in a manner which is healthy and safe. Right? Healthy and safe. We're frequently just let me catch up with the slides here. Whoops. Yeah. Yeah, so that's at that. Okay, so we're invited, consciously or not, all the time into the sacred space of people's lives, right? Their sacred space. And in these spaces, people are often in a state of crisis, stress, at the very least, vulnerability, right? And they project stuff onto us. This is normal. It's not a problem. It's knowing what to do with that, right? Pastoral leaders are lightning rods. It's just normal. Lightning rods. People come to us in heightened states of stress, crisis, anxiety, vulnerability, projecting hopes and fears of all the years, right, onto you. And transferences. You know that, Psychology 101. Transference. From this other relationship I have, or have had even long ago, boom. Here it comes, that in a vulnerable moment, emotionally, you become whoever you become to me. Mother, father, right? And it just happens in a split second. Now, of course, it happens for the caregiver, too. And we'll talk about that a little bit more, what we call countertransference. That this vulnerable person reminds me of, right? This is not even conscious. Right, I mean, we want to try and make it conscious because I need to remember she or he is not that. They're my congregant. My student, they need my help in a professional way. Highly vulnerable state. The people often come to us. What we do say can be extremely impactful. Sometimes we might underestimate how much spiritual and psychological power has been given to us. Again, the playing field is not. It's never level. It's not a level playing field. Boundaries remind pastors of this fact and lift up cardinal principle of pastoral ethics. A boundary violation occurs when a pastoral leader places his or her needs above those of the person in their care. All right? One more time, the boundary violation occurs when a pastoral leader places personal needs above those of, for example, the congregant. They are the one in need. I have my needs. I'll be very honest about it. You do too. But now is not the place or the time for me to get them met. We can identify warning signs of boundary problems, and three of them come to my mind. That if I start, to get the vibe that the person in my care is taking care of me, number one, that's a warning sign, and not just a single case, but this starts happening again and again in my pastoral practice. It's a reversal of roles, right? Two, information about the interaction is kept secret from people who ought to know about the situation. All right? So secrecy is not synonymous with confidentiality. I'm all for confidentiality. But this is a situation where other people can and should know, not breaking confidentiality. But let's keep it between us. And third, the pastor is using his or her office to meet personal goals and needs. All right, so boundaries are for everyone's safety. For everyone's safety, of course, for the person in my care, but for me too. Right? We're at risk of unethical practice when we approach a pastoral relationship as if it were a personal one. So know thyself, and when it feels like, I could be going in that direction, need to talk to my spiritual director, my colleague, my therapist. I mean, it really is okay to have a good pastoral psychotherapist. I do. I am one. But we all have our growing edges. As they say, our blind spots. Sometimes, like, this has been coming up with me in my work. And have this great pastoral therapist, Pat, who, I don't see her all the time, but the door is always open. Call me if you need to, bounce something off of me, which I do from time to time. And the second part of this, really key, we live and work in a highly litigious society. Right? I mean, just turn on WCBS, which I do, on the 8s, traffic, weather. And then you get the commercials. Have you been hurt? Have you been injured? And now it's lawyers with hello, clergy sex abuse. These legal teams. We want to talk to you. Wow. And just being clear about the potential legal ramifications. right? Not just the spiritual, very important, ethical, very important, and legal, as our society gets ever more litigious. By maintaining awareness of boundaries, we're free to enter the sacred space of spiritual connection with the person in our care. I'm aware of my needs, and I'm able to mentally set them aside, right? I'm aware. It's not denial. You know, I feel it coming up, but I'm able to check that. I'll get my needs met later with this person, or, you know, in this setting, not now. The pastor knows that the congregant needs him or her as pastor, even if it feels that they need us for more than that, which, you know, we get that vibe sometimes. But that's what they need us for, coming to us in moments of vulnerability. When boundaries are clear, the congregant experiences spiritual freedom, not feeling controlled or beholden to me, the pastor, but able to bring the totality of herself, himself, to a pastor without fear of negative consequences, without feeling judged. Well, you're angry about that. Well, that's a deadly sin, right? Judging what the person's feeling, and you can be sure that they'll leave that part at the door from now on. And that's the part that needs to be heard and healed. And can we hold the totality of the person's experience, come what may, right? While confidentiality is offered and protected, unhealthy secretiveness is avoided. And, you know, time to time, I'm called in to do conflict management with faith communities. Sometimes it's wonderful. Sometimes just preventative. That's always a great thing, but usually not. Usually when it's like stage 4 or 5. And you just see this pattern of secrets, right, and triangling, wanting the pastor to, you know, to take my side or our side and not their side. And that becomes commensurate with the dysfunction, proportional to the dysfunction in the system. So the pastor neither intrudes, we're not intrusive, we're not avoidant either, right? It's finding that middle way, but stays engaged in a way which is sensitive to the needs of the situation. And I'm not driven by needing to be needed. I mean, some of us have that need, right? Let's just be honest. We're in helping professions, as educators, as clergy, right? As faith community staff. We want to help, right? We want to help, make a difference, do something meaningful. But it's not needing to be needed by a desire to get emotional compensation for all the energy I give, right? I give so much. Does anyone ever give me anything in return here? You know? All right, so does who said? Well, I think in the opening devotions that there was mention of Peter Steinke. who, and his brother Alan, longtime staff of Lutheran Counseling, one of my colleagues. But anyway, so there's this lineage of, if you know, again, Psych 101, marriage and family systems. The grandfather of family systems approach to counseling was Murray Bowen. And his student was Ed Friedman. And his student was Peter Stanke. Actually, this is a really good lineage. But anyway, Friedman. Has anyone ever read his book, Rabbi? Ed Friedman? He's a marriage and family therapist and a rabbi. Generation to generation. It's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. He took what he learned from Bowen. I mean, he passed it on to Stanke. But in between, he put out this book, Generation to Generation, likening the congregation to a family system. That you see this and this and this and this. It's not apples and oranges. I mean, it is in certain ways, but in other ways, it's apples and apples. And he gives us a useful frame of reference which is how do we become a non-anxious presence? Because a system, whether it be institutional, congregational, family, always has a certain amount of stress and anxiety. And sometimes we get sucked into that, right? And Friedman, in Generation to Generation, is saying, no, we have to be the non-anxious pastoral presence. And how do we do that? Not by putting on our firefighting gear. Where's the fire today, or the fires? But by being self-differentiated. Wow, it almost seems counterintuitive, right? I have to be self-differentiated, 1 foot out, to keep my balance so that I can be connected to all of you in a really healthy way. Self-differentiated is not, avoidant, standoffish. It's knowing who I am, what comes up in me in this pastoral intervention, what it triggers in me, being really clear about that. So then, the more I'm aware, self-aware, situationally aware, then I have choice, right? Oh, I can take the full plunge into the stress, the anxiety, the dysfunction. Or I can stay out a bit. I can help to manage that pastorally. But I'm not, Friedman said, per family systems, I'm not going to triangulate my way dysfunctionally into what is really an issue between her and him. Okay, I'm there to help pastorally, but I'm not there to put out the fires, because then I become depleted, and I become the opposite of a non-anxious presence. I'm highly anxious, right? Now that's one of the warning signs. All right, so how do healthy boundaries contribute to our safety? I mean, it's kind of like a no-brainer that they certainly contribute to the well-being, the safety of the person in our care. But how do they contribute to our safety? Well, as I mentioned, we all bring personal needs into whatever we do, right? We're human too. We have needs. We bring them, our personhood, into the context of ministry. And we have very basic needs, right? It's Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Speaking of Psych 101, food, shelter, rest, safety. But other needs are more complex. The need to be connected, the need to experience relational warmth, affection. We have need for that. And my goodness, pastoral leadership in ministry is very relational. It's always relating to people, right? So you have that, and you know, we have these needs, like every human being, to be connected, to feel warmth, to feel appreciated, to feel affection. So I think this is the moment where it might be good to just, you know, say time and, you know, put this out here, the to be or not to be. Right, and in the context of boundaries / sexual misconduct, is this something we do or not do, or is it like a gray area? Well, what do you think about that? And again, I know, Myers-Briggs, you know, so some of you are extroverted. Some of you are introverted. Some of you hug, some of you don't hug. So is it a good thing, a bad thing? Does it all depend? Sure, if yeah. Okay. So know thyself and know the other person before hugging. Or maybe asking, right? Would it be okay? Is it okay? Yeah. Okay, thank you. I'm reminded of the live streaming.
All right, so I will be very old-fashioned. I think when you're in your pastoral role, which basically every day you go to work, you're in your pastoral role, you should be in your clerical collar, not only to remind other people of who you are, but as I was told long ago by Pastor Adolf Meyer, to remind yourself of who you are, and that you should, I'm very kind of an old fuddy-duddy. Most of the people in my church and in our school, where I have a great deal of interaction as well, are Mr. and Mrs. Some people are first names, but usually in a setting, in a general setting, I will even call them Mr. and Mrs. And I do hug people on occasion, but very rarely. It is, I want to stay away from a hug. Sometimes it's warranted, sometimes it's needed, but better be draw more of a straight line, because once you cross that line, there ain't no going back if you've made that mistake. So there, I just laid it out there. I'll sit down and be quiet.
Thank you for the feedback. Thank you for the feedback. And sometimes I hear, well, Jesus did it. You know, I don't know about hugging, but you know, he reached out and touched, right? Well, so, yeah, he's the Son of God, right? Which you're not, and I'm not. What, yeah. But I don't think it was the litigious bombardment and God bless lawyers, right? But you know, it was not as, you know, from the historical record that I see, not as litigious as, and you know, so we don't want to get so, I don't know what's the right word, that you know, I'm so cautious that I'm pastorally ineffective, but at the same time we have to be really smart. So a couple years ago, I got this call from a lawyer who was representing someone that I knew of, a pastoral counselor. And the lawyer was calling me asking if I would consider being expert witness for the defense. And I was starting to, you know, dollar signs immediately went off. Ooh, you know, this could be a few $1,000s. Right? Because the pastoral counselor, you know, from all accounts, did such good work and established, you know, a solid, reputable, thriving pastoral counseling practice. But they're, you know, started to do this as a regular practice. Hugging clients, they come in, you know, with so much burden and pain and suffering, right? And his heart goes out to them, you know, come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden. They need a hug. You know, at the end, was well-intentioned. I really believe that. And you know, with one client, did it on a regular basis, the story goes. And then, you know, I guess she was able, this client, to work through whatever, and until she felt okay, and you know, we can terminate the counseling. And they both agreed to that. You know, have a wonderful life, if you ever need to come back, type thing, as we do. And then months later, he gets this, you know, he's served with not criminal, but civil lawsuit for sexual misconduct, sexual harassment. And then, you know, that's why I'm called. And thank God at Lutheran Counseling, even some of us who are more senior, we still do supervision with one another, you know, speaking of accountability. And so this is what I presented, my week to present, you know, that I've been called to be expert witness. And I think they're going to give me like $4,000 or $5,000 for this. Oh, you know, Christmas money. And but you know, one wise colleague said, think about it, because I went that route years ago. And when you're cross-examined, you'll be made to feel like you know nothing. So by the prosecution. Think if you want to go through that grilling, and, you know, so, well, I need to go back and give this a prayerful reflection, and I ended up declining. No, I'd like the money, but, you know, and good luck with your defense, but, you know, whoever they got as expert witness, you know, this pastoral counselor, his career was over. And he was not even near retirement. You know, his practice was taking off, thriving, really good. And it all went down the drain. all right? And it's fairly sobering, and it's not, oh my goodness, let's head for the hills, right? I'm not an alarmist. I'm a realist, but not an alarmist. So how do we walk that fine line between being effective, committed, available practitioners, but knowing where to draw that boundary line, right? And I, in my supervision group, this colleague said, I think to all the years I did seminary preparation, ordination process, then went into clinical training, the thousands of hours to become licensed. And, something that gets misread like that, there it goes, all that hard work. So it's something, for pastoral leaders to take very seriously, be aware of, not obsess over, not even be stressed out, but to be very mindful of it. Educators, right? My goodness, with students in our care, all right? And I do have a client who comes to see me. She's, in my counseling practice, a sexual abuse survivor. And she talks about, her pastor is a hugger. And we go out in the receiving line after service. And God bless him. He's not being weird or creepy or anything. This is just him. And he hugs one person after another. So good to see you, so good to see you. And I know that's just what he does, but she says, I can't tell you what that does to my body. And it's not because of him. It's because of what I've lived through, survived, trying to heal from. Right, in a very, very young age for her. That she can remember probably before she had cognitive memory development. Right, so when that's the case, that's way down the brainstem in the central nervous system. And it gets triggered without even being aware of it. Why does he's a good guy. He's a great pastor. And, I do this. Yeah, well, and then, I just ask, as in a caring way as possible, why do you think that is? And yeah, I know. We're trying to heal. So the issue, you see this again and again. Well, it was well-intentioned. And it might have been, but that's not the fundamental issue. The fundamental issue is more, how was it received, right? And this legal situation, oh my goodness, was done with the very best of intentions from what I know of this person, right? And yet this person, whatever it did to, I don't know if his client was a sexual abuse survivor or whatever, but, months later, she got to thinking about it, went to a lawyer, and they came calling.
I think one of the things we have to be aware of also is culture when it comes to how we interact with our members and the like. My first parish was in Brooklyn, and very diverse ethnic group of folks. My wife is originally from Western New York, of Prussian background, and the members of the congregation, because of the cultural aspects, the way you greeted one another was with a handshake and a kiss. And it was very challenging for my wife because that's not the way she was raised at all. to be a part of that. And it wasn't a kiss, but it was so, most like a cheek-to-cheek touch, so to speak. But it was offensive if you didn't respond in that way. And so you have to be very, very aware of cultural, traditional, the folks that you have, and always be willing and hopefully be receptive to being instructed about how to react and respond to people. That's, I think, is very key. And to let your folks know, your people know that you're open to that as well.
Absolutely, be instructed, really important. And the cultural piece, right? I mean, some cultures, like in, what I read and know of Latina students, talk about personalismo. Yeah, I mean, if you're standoffish and some might wonder, but you have to know your people, the person in your care, the culture, be informed by, ask. I mean, I even do it, in senior care, making the rounds. Can I take your hand and pray with you before I leave? Right? And I think it's a respectfulness rather than just assuming, well, this is what I do. Right? There's a spirit of respect that, I'm going to ask you. And, oftentimes, sure.
Speaking of culture.
Oh, just the mic. Yeah, thank you.
Like, for example, in our culture, if you were to speak to somebody or counsel somebody, and if you doesn't shake that person's hand or hug that person, they won't feel welcome. So it's usually our practice, if you counsel a person or talk to a congregation member, you shake their hand or you hug them and they feel good.
Okay. Yes. So again, the oh, okay. As so is illustrated, right? Yeah, cultural variation. One more, and then we'll finish up boundaries and move into harassment.
Well, I just noticed a interesting variation, that handshake, the hug, and did you notice what came after that? Pat, pat, pat.
Oh, with them?
Yes. The male hug to show that, this is just friendly. This is just being a nice guy to a nice guy.
Okay.
I guess as you were taking 10 or 15 minutes, did you have a bottom line besides ask permission? And let's face it, sometimes you ask permission, which I strongly overall believe in, that also creates a bit of a barrier, because now how does that person reply? What is he asking permission to do exactly? Is this merely a hug? These are cultural currents. When I was a young guy a long time ago, the worst thing could be said about you is you're uptight. And now I discover uptightness has come back into fashion again. So what are we saying, basically?
Or can you be uptight in a warm and caring way?
You answered that question.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm not saying, by the way, that this is easy. This is complex territory, and that there are a number of variables that we have to be aware of. All right, so let me round out the boundaries and then spend the rest of our time going through harassment, sexual harassment. Some of you have encountered Henri Nouwen. I mean, Nouwen's brilliant move was that we are wounded healers. Because his concern was that, you know, sometimes there's this expectation that we rise above it. You know what I mean? Like we transcend, you know, we're ordained. We transcend the human condition. And Nouwen said that that's not the case. I mean, we don't put our wounds out there, our early injuries, you know, Sunday after Sunday. No, but we recognize that we're in this together, the human experience. I have certain credentials, but that does not exempt me from the realities of human living. My heavens, I look at Paul's letter to the Romans, you know, the 7th chapter. Talk about being in the human condition. What I want to do, I don't do. And what I don't want to do, I keep doing. That's the apostle of the apostles. So, you know, this thing that, you know, I have this persona that, and hopefully I don't today, maybe I do, and forgive me, but I'm not, please don't think you know, moment to moment, you know, trying to have it together, but we're in it, we're wounded healers, and we have to be mindful of our growing edges, areas we need to continue healing, as Nouwen said famously. So if we think we rise above it all, we become vulnerable to acting out our needs in the course of ministry in ways that are not healthy for those in our care, for ourselves. So attention to boundaries is an invitation to take what I would say a critical three-step process that's at the core of self-care. First, be completely honest about your needs. You have them, I have them. Be honest. Emotional, spiritual honesty. Well, this is how I want to see myself, how I'd like to be. That's not how you are. It's not how I am. Jesus said the truth sets us free. Not minimizing the truth, not tweaking the truth, not sugarcoating. The truth sets us free. We might not like it. There's this part of me, sheesh, this reactive part. I wish he would just calm down or grow up or heal or something. But he's there. You know, be honest about you know, who we are. Second, pastors must bracket our needs. Bracket our needs so that you're not taking care of me when the situation is me caring for you. You know, as we consult with others, supervisors, professional colleagues, mentors, therapists, spiritual director, you know, holding us accountable in a loving, caring way, we begin to see the situation more clearly. Oh, I didn't see that. You know how it goes, right? You can't see the whole picture every single time, nor can I. What am I missing here? Help. We're connectional. Third step is that pastors take full responsibility for addressing our needs. For accepting our life choices. Right? I also have a family who needs my time. But I'm spending 80, 90 hours at the parish. They're basically getting short shrift. So how do I rebalance, recalibrate? Not to mention my own self-care. Oh, but I feel, and you know, I sometimes see clergy in counseling who, you know, I feel guilty when I take a day off. Well, you know, learn to, you know, work through that. The guilt, so, you know, it helps me as pastor in person to be more mindful of the boundaries. And going back to transference, countertransference, because we become lightning rods, educators. My heavens, become lightning rods. Hopes and fears. I want this to be the best educational experience, the best pastoral experience, the best faith community. You ever hear a congregant say, "Oh, I've never had a pastor like you before"? Careful. Careful. I mean, you can say, "Oh, well, thank you," you know, but you know, don't let it, you know, stroke the ego too much, because, you know, then there can be blame for other things. You know, I get credit for this, for preaching the best sermons ever. Whoa. I mean, I once heard that right out of seminary. I mean, I was a little incredulous, like, oh, really? I mean, I just started in ministry. And this congregant saying, you preach the best sermons ever. Oh, wow, thank you so much. And then, you know, as time went on, I learned that their history was just, you know, very, very discombobulated relations at home, one faith community after another, one therapist after another, looking to find the perfect person, right? The perfect community, which, to my knowledge, doesn't exist in this world, right, on this side of the grave. And our countertransference. So you have to be aware of that when you're projecting onto someone. I mean, to use basic psych terminology. And I've done it. That's why we have accountability structures. Right, you know, a number of years ago, a teenage high school girl was referred to me. And smart girl. I mean, academically excellent. Had so much going for her. Athletic, phenomenal athlete. But romantic relationships, oh my Lord. Abusive, dysfunctional. And so, you know, she came to me to work through, I'm getting out of this abusive relationship. And she did, and we worked on that, and then, you know, she comes in one day, and I found this new guy. And great, let's see how this goes. We'll check in, and, well, turns out, you know, that there was repetition. And I'm kind of like, you know, she's a little younger than at that time, my daughter. But, you know, having lived through the teenage years as a dad, I was projecting onto her, right? And there was the age difference that my countertransference, find a nice guy. What are you doing? I mean, I didn't say it that way, but that was kind of my energy, like, stop it. Just... You know, find a nice guy. You deserve that. Well, so, you know, I check in with my supervision group. They ask me, so who is she to you? You know what they're asking? Well, she's my client. Yeah. But it sounds like you're being a bit of her dad. And she already has a dad. Remember, you're her therapist. You're not her dad. Right? And that was so helpful. Yeah, that's right. telling her what to do. Stop it. Because I've been through this before, with clients, with my own daughter, right? Not necessarily in that shape or form, but, and we just have to be aware of that. So to finish up on boundaries, as pastoral leader, we can let the most helpful and appropriate attributes of our personhood flow into our ministry. We don't have to keep them entirely separate. There are good things about you personally, good things about me. We can bring them into our work even as we're operating with full self-awareness and without self-concern, without getting my needs met. My worth is being a child of God, not God's worker. This is really important. It's not, we don't determine ultimate outcome. That's right? That's for the Lord, or the Spirit, the Holy Spirit. Holy Spirit determines outcome for this person, for this faith community that will go on after I'm not working with them, or I'm not here, right? I always have an empty chair in my counseling room as a reminder when I'm trying to do too much. It's kind of like the Elijah chair. But in this case, it's the Holy Spirit chair, yes, the third reality in the room. And I'm here to accompany the person, to walk with them, right? Help them sort through whatever. But where they land, it's in your hands, oh Lord, right? Boundaries help us see that it's not only okay, the last thing, to have a personal life. You do have a personal life, right? If you don't, you can always get started today. Today's the first day, right? Separate from the pastoral role. And it's not only okay, it's an essential component of healthy life and healthy ministry. Life is a balancing act, even in ministry. Going away for a while, shifting gears, however you want to say it. And so this is why having a rich, authentic, personal life, personal spiritual life is so critical for us. I mean, that Duke Clergy Health Initiative found that a lot of clergy don't have, I mean, you'd assume that we all have spiritual practice. A deep, rich prayer life, sometimes not so much, right? Wake up and, the firefighting starts right now. Oh gosh, I've got to get to, right? So we have to be doing it for ourselves. Bottom line is boundaries, draw the line, but they don't have to alienate, okay? They don't have to alienate. They're for everyone's safety. Your safety, my safety, the safety of the community. All right, so Karin, just a process comment. How late do we go here? Oh, okay, so that's, let me walk you through the sexual harassment, and then when we come back, do Q&A. I have some case studies. I want to show you this afternoon, basically, a video clip of the Duke Clergy Health Initiative. All right, so, and those, by the way, are boundary signs, and we talked about this: reversal of care, secrecy, personal needs are getting met. We talked about that. All right, preparatory to talking about sexual harassment sexual harassment isn't normal, but attraction is. You know this, right? Let's be honest. Know thyself. That's not deny it that, I meet with this client or new student or whatever. I don't even think about it. Just this. It's a basic physiological, biological thing, right? You recognize this person as attractive. It's what we do with that. Do we act on it? Right? Or not just externally, but do I act on it here? Dwelling on it, just feeding the fantasy. And then I start texting the person, right? How's it going? Just checking in with you today. And again, later that day, and the next day, and the day after, whoa, I'm starting to act on it. And that's where the problem is. Sexual harassment, unwelcome conduct, which is either of... Karin, is it okay? Can we go to 12:30? Is that okay? Thank you. And then we'll just get through this. Is unwelcome conduct which is either of a sexual nature or which is directed at an individual because of his or her sex. It's unlawful. Not to mention unethical, right, from an ethical standpoint. And do you have to do this in New Jersey? I mean, we have to do, you mentioned an educational setting with Monique. In New York, all New York employees. So I've had to do it with Lutheran Counseling. I've had to do it with Fordham University, the online test, training, tutorial. Say again? Okay. Coming to New Jersey. All right. Thank you for that. So it's unlawful, right? Such conduct has the purpose or effect of interfering with an individual's work performance or in creating an intimidating, hostile environment, even if the reporting individual is not the intended target of the sexual harassment. Goes and reports it. I'm witnessing this and I feel so uncomfortable. Such conduct is made either explicitly or implicitly. A term of condition of employment, well, it was never said. Well, it was implied. I felt that if I didn't do submission to or rejection of such conduct is used as the basis for employment decisions affecting an individual's employment. So what constitutes a sexually harassing hostile work environment? Words, signs, jokes, well, just being funny. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. If you were just being funny or I was just being funny, how was it received? What was the impact on the other person, right? On the office staff? Or more overt, right? Physical violence of a sexual nature directed at an individual. It also constitutes unwanted verbal or physical advances Sexually explicit derogatory statements or discriminatory remarks by someone which are offensive or objectionable to the particular person, causes the person to feel discomfort at the very least or humiliation, interferes with the person's job performance. And sexual harassment also occurs when a person in authority tries to trade benefits or job benefits for sexual favors or romantic favors. Hiring, promotion, your promotion's coming up. Continued employment, how long will you be with us? What we're hearing a lot in the news these days, quid pro quo. You want to keep your job, right? All right. Examples of sexual harassment can be very obvious, overt, touching, pinching, patting, kissing, hugging, right? Is it or isn't it? I mean, you get a legal team involved, and you know how it goes. Sometimes they can have a field day, right? And I don't want, because an expression, a well-intentioned expression, was misunderstood. Now, I have this legal team contacting me, grabbing, brushing against another's body, or sexual battery, molestation, assault. Which, I mean, we are leaders of faith community. Faith. This will shake the foundations of one's faith. Right? We don't want to do this, right? Person has, a faith in the basic goodness of life, creation, the universe, God. It's good. Not anymore. When something like this happens, it shakes the foundations, and it takes the rest of one's life, and I think the life to come, to work through it. Unwanted sexual advances or propositions, sexual favors, again, overt or implied, having to do with person's job performance, promotion, subtle or obvious pressure, sexually oriented gestures, noises. I was just kidding. I mean, from an ethical standpoint, it doesn't matter. It's not ethical, nor is it legal. Right? Remarks, jokes, comments about the person's sexuality, sex stereotyping, illegal. When conduct or personality traits are considered inappropriate, comments about, that's not how women are or act or men. Have to be careful with displaying pictures, posters, calendars, graffiti, and in a digital age. Digital info and images, what's on my computer, my phone sitting on my desk, which could, if we're not careful, constitute sexual harassment. And then hostile actions taken against an individual because of that individual's sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, could be interfering with a person's workstation. tools, equipment, computer, otherwise interfering with the individual's ability to perform their job, sabotaging their work, bullying, right? Just making it uncomfortable for you as I can possibly make it. Intimidation, bullying. And it can occur in the workspace or outside the workspace, right? While we're traveling together on business or at a dinner party or online. Wow, you posted what about me? Oh my goodness, and we well know the Cyberbullying Research Center in Florida, the statistical information, the rate of cyberbullying. Right, we have to be careful. Calls, texts, emails, social media can also constitute unlawful workplace harassment. Well, I didn't do that at work. I did it on my Facebook. You have a working relationship. Just the last thing is the last thing is about retaliation, which is unlawful. It can be any action that could discourage a worker from coming forward to report something that's going on in workspace. And again, it could be in the actual workspace or another setting. Retaliation unlawful under federal, state law, and I would add, in terms of pastoral leadership and practice, it's not ethical. Okay, so last thing I'll leave you with. If you want to know more about ethics of pastoral practice, I'd refer you to Richard Gula's. Some of you may have read this. Just Ministry, like a double entendre, right? Just Ministry, just Ministry. And the subtitle is Professional Ethics for Pastoral Ministers. And Gula lists that strategies for prevention, know thyself. Again, the risk of being repetitious. What are your risk factors? Like if I'm in this situation, I can start to feel. And that's not the problem. The problem is what do you do with that feeling? Know what to do with it, where to go. It's like AA again, right? Like we said earlier, 12-step. I have a sponsor. I feel it coming on me. I want to drink. I want to use. But that's my moment to the sponsor. Let's have coffee. Right? Similarly, I know where to turn when I'm feeling a risk factor or warning sign. And understanding the dynamics, we've talked about this. People project stuff onto us, we project stuff onto them. It's having awareness of that. Right? So after I got that professional feedback, I knew I was responding to my client like a daughter in certain ways, and she's my client, and I made that shift. I became more aware of that. Avoid dual relationships as much as possible. Sometimes it's difficult to do in parish settings. I'm seeing this person for pastoral care, sharing personal information with me, and then I'm invited to this extended family, a Christmas party, which is one thing. Another thing is if like one spouse shares with me that, I didn't know this, that they met someone else. And they're thinking about, their spouse doesn't know this, but they're in this to be or not to be. Do I stay in the marriage or go this other way? Right, so I'm having pastoral spiritual care with this person, but also close friends. Oh, so let's go to the movies and dinner as couples, right? Warning bells were going off. And had to be clear that, with what you shared with me, I just have a boundary issue now and will continue to see you for pastoral spiritual care, but have to hold off on this other thing. And until we see, how things develop here. Dual relationships and maintain self-care. We'll talk about this a little bit more this afternoon. What is your spiritual practice? Do you have one? A couple years ago, I did a book on neuroplasticity and pastoral and spiritual care, this emerging field of contemplative neuroscience, that contemplative prayer, actually, if it's done regularly over time, calms the stress region of the brain. It's a wonderful thing. I mean, we've had this at our disposal for thousands of years, and now science is confirming, it's good for you to have a daily spiritual practice, prayer, contemplative practice. How are we doing that? So even for a few minutes before I jump out of bed and, what's happening? This is the day the Lord has made. Just to take a sacred moment. Right? What a gift. There's no guarantee. Hopefully it's not our last day, but you never know. Right? So at least, and I try and do it as, I'm not always successful, but my intention is to, before I spring forth into the day, today is the day. The Lord has made, I will rejoice and be glad in it. Thank you. And the Lord, I'll be ever thankful. The Taizé song. Stress management, therapy, nothing wrong with it. No shame in it. There's strength in it. It's not a sign of weakness. Supervision, spiritual direction, exercise, going away for a while, having fun once in a while, right? What's this have to do with boundaries and harassment? The self-care piece, I'm better able to mind the boundaries in my professional practice when I'm doing that. All right, so thank you so much. We'll pick up with Q&A after lunch and see where you are, okay?
Okay, before you all move, I just have some instructions.